Today's presentation is about the two things that the most successful attorneys do that the rest do not. And just get started here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the presentation, and then after the presentation, like we do every week, I'll be taking questions. And you can pretty much ask anything that you want, either about the presentation or just general career questions and so forth that you may have. Okay, so let's get started. So this is just very quickly about a couple of attorneys I was working with fairly recently. Two attorneys approached me recently looking for jobs. Both were very self-confident and had every reason to be successful, but both attended top law schools, did well. Both got jobs in major firms out of law school, but have recently lost their jobs. And one had lost their job because they were fired, and then the other lost their job because they quit. And so both of them had made very similar mistakes. And it's very easy for me to tell the types of attorneys that are going to be successful in their careers and the ones that are not. And I can usually pick it up fairly quickly in a conversation. And I'm going to try to teach you today a little bit about some of the ways that you can structure your career in a way that it will make you successful. The attorney who was fired was very tactical in the way he approached his career and not strategic. And the attorney who quit actually approached their career strategically, but not tactically. So in order to do very well as an attorney, it's important that you learn how to be both strategic and tactical. Okay, so this is a little bit about what a tactical attorney does. And so a tactical attorney, for the most part, do things that are related to the way people see them and believe that these tactics are going to get them ahead. The one that was fired had worked in a very prestigious New York law firm, and then for about a year, and then he was let go. And he did very well. He went to a top 5 law school, actually, and was probably one of the top 10 students in his class. He received a reward for being in the top 12 or something, but he was probably in the top 10. And he had a history of very good academic achievement and life achievement, and honestly looked like he was going to be very successful. But his problem, which is a very common problem, was that he didn't have a good strategy. Things started off very well for him. He was worked on different matters. He was very smart, very smart. But he soon made some mistakes. And what those were mainly questioning various assignments. So he would go back to people that assigned him the work and tell them that it wasn't necessary because it wouldn't help the client, or it was a waste of money because he already knew the answer. And he believed that the assignments and the stuff he was being asked to do were wasting the client's money. And he honestly may have been, and this is a mistake that a lot of young attorneys make, and he may have been right about all that. But the problem is that the people that are assigning you work in many law firms do want to work things in a certain way. They may want to feel powerful. They may want to increase the bills that the clients are paying. And there's all sorts of things that could be happening. So this attorney got their first performance review and was actually just asked to leave the firm. They told him he could have a couple months to look for a job, and good luck. And so now that's what he's doing. He's going into the office each day and just sitting there and wondering what happened, and feeling, of course, like he was right and the firm was wrong, and puzzled about why he did so well in law school and why what's happening to him is happening. What I recommended to this attorney is, because he was such little experience, and when I say little experience, I'm talking about 6 months of experience, I told him to start looking for a judicial clerkship so he can start a judicial clerkship hopefully in June or something along those lines. And when he does that, it'll look like to new law firms that he worked for a year and went to clerk. And this will save his career. And I also told him that it was going to be very difficult for him to get a job, because if you're looking for a job and you're coming from a major law firm and you're looking for a job within 6 months, the odds are pretty good that you're going to have a very hard time finding a job, because law firms are going to assume that there was something that you did wrong, and they're going to be a little bit afraid of hiring you. So I told him to start looking for a clerkship, and which I think was pretty good advice. But his response was that he wanted to stay in big law, and that was really all he wanted. He was concerned about making money and so forth. I gave him a pretty long lecture about what he was doing wrong. I told him that he should have been doing what was asked of him. I explained to him the difference between being a soldier, which is someone that just does work, and a general, which is the one that plans the type of work that's being done. I also told him that the partners that are assigning him work were paid based on how much work they're assigned to him and how much he produces, and that it was important for him to do the work in a certain type of way. And I also explained that the partners were excited for him to be doing work, for them to being able to make money, And it wasn't really his responsibility to fully question assignments and so forth. And that what he had done by constantly questioning assignments was actually became a liability, because he not only was doing the work in a way designed, but he was trying to prevent the firm from making money, partners with cases and so forth. He was preventing them from making money. And they were worried that he was talking behind their back and saying they were having to do unnecessary work and stuff. And he was literally standing in the way of the firm. And how can you be expected to advance in any law firm if you're standing in the way of the firm? And so this is a thinking process that a lot of young attorneys have. And I've seen it, even older attorneys have it, and partners have it, and attorneys at all levels. The moment you start standing in the way of your employer, you have to realize you're only one person. And this is a giant institution with all sorts of people to support, and larger agendas are outside yourself. And if you want to make a difference, you can certainly go start a solo practice or something. But this is just not how it works in most employers. It'd be no different if you were a hardcore Republican trying to go to work in a super liberal Democratic government office. It would be very hard for you to change the way things are being done, and vice versa. If you were a super liberal trying to work in with hardcore Republicans. It's just, you can't change the direction of something, especially as a young attorney. It's just not something you can do. Then I sent this attorney jobs all over the country. I told him he'd have to look in multiple markets because it was going to be very difficult for him to find a job with 6 months of experience in New York. I told him he'd have to look at small firms as well as large firms. Told him that he needed to start looking immediately. And he said what most people think when they're in trouble, that he wanted to think about it and didn't want to take any form of action right away. Instead, he wanted to think about it, and as if what was happening to him wasn't really happening. So I sent him several large firms and small firms. And then he proceeded to look at each firm very carefully. And because he had such great grades and so forth, he believed that he could work anywhere. And he talked about how each firm wasn't suitable. So he had reasons to exclude pretty much almost every firm that he was sent, except for a few really good ones. And what I realized about this attorney was that he lacked a strategy. And if you think of what my strategy for him was, my strategy was to keep him employed and keep his career on track. My strategy, which is why I recommended a clerkship, which has nothing to do with me making a commission or anything. It was putting his needs first. But then my next strategy was to have him look at other markets where his skills would be more valued and people would be willing to overlook he'd been in someplace for 6 months. And that was strategic. But he was tactician. He was a tactician. What he wanted to do was he wanted to make sure that he stayed in New York, that he continued making a lot of money, and that was all that mattered to him. He wasn't concerned with the fact that as a 25 or 26-year-old, your career could be 50 years in the future. So it goes 56 attorneys practice in their 90s, so 60 plus years. And getting himself good training and so forth at this point of career, his immediate tactic was to be in the best firm right away and to pretend like whatever happened to him didn't happen. And if he'd had a strategy, he would have realized you had to keep your head down. He would have thought about what it takes to become a partner in a firm. He would have read things about it. He would have studied law firms. And the strategy that you employ is extremely important because most people operate with loose tactics. If you have loose tactics and you don't know where, you're going to make all sorts of mistakes like this guy made along the way. And I see people like this attorney, by the way, every year. And this year I saw a ton of them. Last year I saw a ton of them. This year it was even worse than most years because of this virus and people losing their jobs. And so people just don't make the right decisions because they're not thinking strategically. Would be, I go to a clerkship and then my resume is even stronger, even though this stuff happened, I learn a lesson and then I go to a better firm. But that's how he was thinking. And that's very loose tactics. And obviously the result is unemployment, long-term unemployment, then being disaffected with the legal profession, doing something else with your career, not being happy, thinking that someone wronged you, being angry, never really understanding things, sometimes never, or maybe later in your career when you become in a position of authority, maybe not even ever reaching your full potential because you're too tactical, which happens a lot. Okay, so the next one is the purely strategic attorney. And the other attorney was a strategist. He knew exactly what he wanted. And so some people go into law firms with a strategy. Some people go into any employer with a strategy. Some people go into a law firm that when I was practicing, I knew several people that went to work in law firms and all they wanted to do was be in the U.S. Attorney's office. So they worked as closely as they could with any attorney that had ever worked there. they did good work, and they had a strategy, and that was it. I saw a lot of attorneys like that actually in the firms I worked in. And this other attorney I'm talking about, though, was a strategist, and he knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be in a partner that rapidly advanced him to be a partner. He wasn't interested in anything else. He'd also gone to a top law school, not done quite as well as this other attorney, but believed that he was entitled to work in a law firm and be a partner and wanted to do that. And so all his decisions were based around that, about going to a firm where he could make partners. So what he did is he joined a top law firm out of law school and very quickly realized that it was going to be hard for him to advance, that there wasn't really going to be a lot of advancement opportunity. He realized that people were not making partner there. He realized that it was going to be very difficult for that to happen, that there just was no chance in that happening. His strategy was to quit, which a lot of people do too, and then believe because you have really good qualifications that a recruiter can find you a position, and without having to learn where you can advance quickly, without you having to learn the ropes or be trained or do anything. And the idea that maybe because you went to a good law school that you're entitled to all these things or got good grades. And this guy was wrong too, because he didn't have good tactics. He had a strategy, but the strategy really wasn't going to get him anywhere. He knew what he wanted to do in the long run, but nothing really ever happened because he didn't employ the proper tactics. So here are the tactical realities. If you want to be like a partner, for example, in most law firms, but in a major law firm, you typically need to go to a good law school, but you don't always need to. It's not the be all end all. It can help, especially if you do really well into getting into a law firm earlier in your career. And then you need to become indispensable to other people in your practice area. So you need to be very strong and become indispensable to other partners. And then generally, if you want to be a partner in most major law firms, at least an equity partner, you're going to need at least a few million in business. And so for young attorneys that are on this call for the first time or that don't understand how things work, most firms have non-equity partners, which you can become typically without any business. But once you become a non-equity partner, then they expect you, in order to become an equity partner, which means you share in the profits. And so a non-equity partner is like a senior associate with a title. You maybe make a little bit more money. And then an equity partner is a partner that actually shares in the profits of the business. So you can make a lot more money. And this other attorney thought that, and typically to be an equity partner, you need to have business. So this other attorney thought his law school and grades were enough, but he didn't understand that in order to get where he wanted to go, he needed to employ tactics, which were stay in the law firm for a long time and work there. And in order to get his goal of advancing to become a partner and do all the things and the tactics you need to employ to get there. So this is real quickly the interplay of strategy and tactics. And this isn't a very long presentation today. For those of you that it seems a little bit slow, we will take a lot of questions and after this. But the critical interplay of strategy and tactics is that strategy is really the process just of figuring out where you want to go. So if you want to be a partner in a major law firm, if you want to be an important politician or go to the U.S. Attorney's Office to start your own firm. So you need to have a strategy. So the strategy is just what do you want, and then how are you going to do that? So typically people will have a goal, which is a strategy, and then they'll have a way of getting there, and then tactics are the means by which you achieve your goal. Meaning you work hard, you'll take positions that bring you closer to your goal constantly. If your strategy is to work in the U.S. Attorney's Office, you may want to go to a firm where there's a lot of former U.S. attorneys, and that's going to bring you closer. Or you may want to do a clerkship, so you get exposed to the government and so forth. And if you want to you have to employ different tactics to get to where you want to go. And a lot of people don't. And so in order to get where you do want to go, though, you need to make the best strategic decisions before you make tactical decisions. And the tactics help you implement your strategy. You have to understand, the big thing I always ask people is understanding what they want to do with their career. Because once you know what you want to do with your career and you make that decision, then you can employ tactics to get there. And so that's a question that everyone should be asking themselves fairly early on, based on what you think appeals to you. And then once you understand that, and then very few people do, you can get to where you want to go. So I asked this attorney, what do you want to do? And he said he didn't know. And so if you don't know what you want to do, then none of the tactics you have are going to ever take you closer to success. If this attorney wanted to be a partner in a law firm, he would have conducted himself differently. If he wanted, and this is the first attorney, if he wouldn't have questioned his assignments if he wanted to be a partner in a law firm, he would have learned everything he could about the people around him and how to get them to help him instead of questioning everything. And then even after he went off track, he would have tried to salvage himself by applying to firms all over that might have openings and doing the clerkships and so forth. So that's the idea of a strategy. And you really do need a strategy. And I always say that the best strategy is typically whatever you want, the tactics you use, you should always have a strategy to go somewhere in the long run that's good for you. It may not be to be a partner. Some people, their goal is to be an author. They're working for a few years and they want to be an author or something and write fiction books. That's fine. But the first attorney was strategic. And so he didn't do any of these things. And what happens is tacticians think that because they're smart and they can do the work, that good things are going to happen to them. And there's plenty of people out there that are smart. There's plenty of people out there that went to good schools, and there's plenty of people that have lots of great qualifications, but just having that is not enough. You need to have a strategy, and you need to be applying that because you'll use those tactics in a way that's going to take you somewhere. So here's a couple of examples I have real quickly, and then we're almost done with this presentation, but it was just two attorneys that want to be partners in major law firms. And one uses tactics and the other tactics with strategy. The first attorney's tactics are, and this is very common, by the way, are to show up for work and do their job. And so the attorney A gets the best possible job with a good firm. They complete their assignments, they follow the rules, and then they hope that after a certain length of time, they'll be a partner, but they really don't care one way or another. They think maybe they'll go in-house, maybe they'll find another job they like. They're keeping their ear to the ground, and who knows? This is how the majority of attorneys approach their career. I would say more than 50%. They're just going to work the hardest they can, do the best they can for now, and see what happens. And then the second attorney employed tactics and strategy, and that would be, and let me just see here. Yeah, so the second attorney B is going to employ tactics and strategy. And so what that would be is it would be simply making sure that they know where they want to go. They continually adjust their strategy in a way that's going to help them get to where they want to go. So if they set a goal to be a partner, they're going to make sure that they learn about who they need to know in the firm to do that. They're going to need to know how much business they need. They're going to need the kind of hours they need. And so I'll just tell you a quick story. When I was in a law firm, that was what my goal was when I was young. And so what I did is I asked about all the people that made partner and what they did and what their hours were, how much business they had, who they knew, who they were connected to, what type of cases they worked on, what type of partners they worked with, all these sorts of questions, and then what is important. And you very quickly get to know exactly what you need to do at each firm you're at to reach your goal. And then you would have tactics that would go along with that. One example would be at a firm I was at, I asked, why didn't this person make partner and this person make partner? And they said, this person only billed 2,400 hours and this person billed 3,200 hours or something. So I was like, okay, that means that hours are extremely important. And so that becomes a measuring stick. And then another person I learned made partner because they were very close with a certain partner that had a lot of business. And I was like, that's number two of the things that are important. So then your tactics become bill hours and get close to people, and you set the rules that you need for each firm. Most attorneys that I speak with have no sense of strategy and tactics. And without that, it becomes very important, very difficult for them to get positions. So let me just see here. So then attorney B, many attorneys will have had numerous jobs in law firms, government in-house, that don't have any sort of stability that you would need to be a partner in a major firm, not committed to practicing law. And they could be partners or senior associates without a lot of business. And so most people, this is what they do. They flounder. They go from law firm to government to in-house to back and forth. There's nothing consistent. It's just all loose tactics and no overall strategy. And that's part of the problem. And if you just deploy loose tactics, you're never going to really get to where you want to go, and you'll never reach your full potential. And this is really what most attorneys are doing. If you've been practicing, you're probably doing it. And I would say to you that it's not too late to change. You can still come up with a strategy, for what you want to do. And then all you need to do is find the tactics that are going to take you there, and just keep course correcting along the way. And there's a famous saying, when an airplane takes off, it has to make thousands of course corrections to get get to, it's constantly steering and doing all these different things to get where it's going. And if it just took off and was pointed in one direction, it would never get there. It would always be blown off course. And so it's like that with people. Like a plane knows exactly where it's going if it's got a pilot in it with a destination. And it's the same thing with your career. You need to know where you're going, and then you need to constantly use the right tactics to get there. A plane will adjust how much fuel it's burning and the speed if it needs to, so it can get to where it's going. It will do all sorts of things. If it has to be in a certain amount of time as a strategy, it will do that. There's all sorts of strategies and things that are employed. But very few attorneys that just employ tactics ever really succeed. And even strategists, often pure strategists, people that have a strategy that is something that they want, may often not employ the tactics they need to get where they want. You really need to have very well-defined tactics and know exactly what you want and where you're going, and have a good mix of them. So that is about it for the presentation today. It's a short presentation, and then I will take questions. But just being tactical is never enough. You can't ever think that you can just sit down and work, and you have to be able to have the ability to work, towards something, and you have to know where you're going, because most people are just using tactics. They think it's okay to show up for work and do the work, or they think it's okay to just bill hours, and you have to do things with a lot of other things in mind and take the right actions. It's interesting, that a lot of people become very successful doing very stupid things and very simple things, and without even working very hard. They become famous, or they make money, or they help other people, or whatever your goal is, because they have a very good strategy and they know what they want, and then they just employ all the right tactics and they choose that. It's fascinating, and you can really pick up a good combination of strategy and tactics a lot of times from using a mentor or someone that kind of gets behind you and helps you with all these things. I hope this presentation has been helpful. I am going to take a quick break and just set up some board for questions, and then I'll come back and answer as many questions as you guys have about this presentation, and then also anything with your careers or that anyone has. Just give me 1 second here. I'm going to open this. Thanks. Sorry.
Oh, no, President can only do a direct presentation.
All right, so we are going to get started here. Let me just see here. Okay. All right, so I'll take the first question. Let me just see here. Okay, the first question, let's see here, is billing the most important criteria for a law firm partner? Just give me 1 second. And the answer to that is, generally for law firm partners, billing, the amount of money that you generate for your firm is the most important. So that can come through billings and hours. So it's all about money, if you can, for attorneys. So the more hours you bill, the more money your firm makes. The more clients you bring into your firm and give work to other people, the more money is generated. So just anytime you're working somewhere, just think in terms of money. So the example that I gave you, where one person billed 1,800 hours and the other billed, 2,400 hours to make partner, and then the other person billed 3,100 or something. That's a difference of if someone's billing out at 800 hours and, say $700 an hour or something, that could be quite a bit of money. That's $490,000. So it's like the more financial contribution, 700. More financial contribution you make to your firm, the more the firm is going to want to reward you for that. The attorney that bills 2,400 hours is making the same amount of money generally as the one that's billing 3,100, but bringing in $490,000. That's just at $700 an hour. So that's how they evaluate people many times. Okay, let's see here. Here is another question. It's a good one. It says, I'm curious of experiences, thoughts about how to go about asking for old job back. For context, I left Big Law after bonus season, but on good terms for a regional firm. Now I want to go back. I left Big Law. I appreciate any thoughts on people who have approached this in the past. So yes, you can go back to your firm if you've had a good experience, if you did well at your firm when you were there. And I don't know why you went to a regional firm, but if the law firm has a need in your practice area, meaning there's a need for someone that does your kind of work, then they may be interested in bringing you back. So for example, if corporate is very busy, and they're having a hard time finding corporate people, if you had a good experience, and they may bring you back. And so that definitely can happen. Typically what you would want to do is call a partner that you worked with very closely when you were there, or partners, and ask them if you can come back, and they may say yes. Now, a lot of times firms won't hire people back. They won't hire them back many times because they're always asking questions when they're hiring somebody. They are asking, can you do the job? Which you guys probably hear me talk about each week. They're asking, can you be managed? Will you do the job long term? And do you want the job? Their question for you is always going to be, they're always going to be wondering, actually, I'll probably number those, is going to be whether or not you'll do the job, whether or not you'll do the job long term. And most of the time, people that leave will leave again. That's almost always what happens. I would think that you probably would too. I've never, in the 20 plus years I've been running this company, I've rehired people. I've never had someone that I rehired actually ever come back. I mean, that ever stay more than like a year and a half or something. So everybody that I've ever rehired always leaves again. And it's like that in law firms too. Anytime someone leaves a law firm that I've ever known, whether or not they leave as a partner or an associate or whatever, they always leave again. And it's usually for the same reasons they left the first time. It's just they brainwash themselves about nostalgia and stuff. You can certainly get back to your firm, but my guess would be if you left for a regional firm, you wanted more autonomy, you wanted more opportunity to make partner, you wanted to make, you said after bonus season, so that was important to you. But that would be my thought, that you'll probably leave again. So a law firm shouldn't hire you, even if you do good work. But if they think you do really good work and you really did get along well with people there, then I don't think that would be much of a problem at all. And they will hire you back. And they do that all the time. It just can be very difficult. Okay, here's another good question. These are a lot of great questions. I love it when you guys ask us good questions because this is so helpful to everybody on the call and so forth. So thank you for people for asking questions. And the more you ask, the better. And no question is stupid. Let's see. I'm getting interested in project finance. The New York market is a possible counter letter from classical finance to restructuring and a Vault 10 to a Latham & Watkins Milbank for project finance. If so, when is it best to lateral? Did I miss the boat? Okay, so that's another great question. So the problem is with law firms hiring people to do a practice area switch. So lateral practice area switches is really what your question's about. You're already doing, it looks like project finance, you're already doing finance. So you want to do, and you're doing it from a major law firm. So it sounds like you probably have a great record. So the question is, can you do the job? The answer to that is really going to be your only problem. And that's yes, no. And then will you do the job long term? Anytime someone's trying to switch practice areas, there's always going to be questions about that, because why are they unhappy doing what they're doing? Is it because they're not getting the right feedback? And everyone has all sorts of explanations, but I don't know. So can you do the job? You're obviously smart enough to do the job if you're doing regular finance and to switch over to project finance. The problem is a firm like Latham & Watkins or Milbank, you have to remember, that these sorts of firms literally have their choice of people. So if Latham & Watkins or Milbank has an opening, and the big markets for project finance, by the way, are Washington, D.C., to a lesser extent, Houston and that sort of thing, and then also New York. Those are your main project finance markets in the US. But then overseas, you've got Hong Kong, Singapore, and those are your big, and to a lesser extent, London. But if you want to work at one of those firms, the problem is they're going to hire someone that already has the experience for the most part, because people with experience will want to work with there. So it's much easier for them to hire someone that already has the experience than you. And then their concern is going to be that if you switch practice areas once, there may be issues with it again. What's to say that you'll go over to project finance and then want to go back to regular finance, which a lot of people do, by the way. They do practice area switches like that. They think, oh, I'm going to love this, and then they go over and don't do it. So you have a little bit of a tough road to hoe. My general advice for everyone here is, if you do want to switch practice areas like that, you probably, for the most part, should never use a recruiter, because recruiters are hired to bring in people that have similar skills and do the same thing. And they can help you with that. But in terms of a practice area switch, that's a risk. Like, recruiters are hired when the person can obviously do the job, when they look like a good risk because they've been working at a long place for a long time, they can be managed, they look like they want the job and so forth. So here, that would be my concern, would be that I would try to network with project finance people and also get jobs or get some of that work in my own firm if I were you. I don't think you've missed the boat. I think you could apply. You could even apply through recruiters if you wanted to, but I don't think, unless it's a very good one, I don't think they're going to be able to really talk to the right people for you. And even if they could, most of these firms are going to want to hire people like at that level that already have the experience. So that's my thought. And if you want to ask a follow-up question, it's a great question as well. Okay, here's another one. Let's see here. Should I remove undergraduate internships from my resume for application for jobs as a law student? I work for 4 years between college and law school. Yes, you probably should. The problem is, I think we spoke about this last week, but an internship as an undergrad doesn't really show anything about your skills. Your skills really come down to when you start getting trained in a law firm. The only thing that your resume needs to show and I'm just going to keep coming back. It's so much easier to do this way for you guys. Intern doesn't show if you can. Internship does not show this, maybe. Now, if your internship was in, an example would be like, say you want to be a healthcare attorney or a patent attorney or something related to your practice area. If it's related to your practice area, which would be something patent, healthcare, tax, anything along those lines, very specialized. If your internships are at all related to your practice area, then sometimes you can, but in general, they don't really care about it. They're more concerned about, but if they see, for example, if you've worked for 5 years in the healthcare industry, then they're going to like that. And so that actually can help you. So that's one thing that I would recommend is to probably leave it on, but I don't think you really need to put your undergraduate internships. We did a resume presentation last week that you should be able to find on BCG. And I would look at that because there are a lot of examples of people that did do internships and so forth. And we talked to them about taking those off. So hopefully that would be helpful for you. Let's see here. Here's a good one. Okay. Here's a good question. Another good question. Yeah, just keep asking questions. They're great questions. I love these questions. Let's see here. Okay. A year into the pandemic, it feels like we can start talking about the changes that cause potentially semi-permanent. For those in big law in New York City specifically, what changes in work culture and work-life balance do you expect to stick around for the foreseeable future, even if things are back to normal later this year? Well, working from home, maybe just a couple of days a week, be allowed at most firms long-term. Have expectations about hours and availability gotten any more or less demanding? Is there greater respect for work-life balance boundaries for associates? i.e. you're more or less likely to get an email on Saturday night. I can't speak because I'm not an associate in a big law firm in New York City, but I certainly work with associates that are. And from what I've seen, I think that people are able to work at home now. But I do feel like the same pressures that have always been there are still there in terms of the hours, and maybe even a little bit more than they were before, because people are just expected to be right in front of their computer working all the time. I personally think that it would be better if I was an associate. I would rather work like that than in an office, because I think working in an office can get exhausting. And I do think the changes, I think there'll be a lot more respect from working at home than there has been before. So I think that will definitely change. And I think that people will be able to work at home a lot more. I think not only do associates like it, but partners like it too. So I think there's definitely more work-life balance in terms of working at home, but I don't know that the demands have gotten any less. And also the inability to a lot of times get in-person feedback and stuff, I think is a little bit harmful to some extent. But yeah, I do think people are just as likely to get urgent emails on Saturday nights. I've certainly talked a lot about practicing law and the ability having to be on all the time and stuff. And attorneys don't like that. And there's different practice settings. You just have to remember that when you're trying to be an attorney in a major law firm, you're really practicing at the highest level. And it's no different than being like a doctor in an emergency room or a surgeon with a rare skill. And things happen at all hours, and companies and jobs and futures and so forth are at risk, or opportunities are there for the taking for companies. And so you have to be able to respond at different hours. The hours can be crazy, but the fact that there's all these interruptions and so forth comes with many times just being a high rank, high level position working for a law firm. And that's just kind of how it works. But I don't think things are that much better now that people are able to work at home. I don't think it's changed very much. Okay, let's see here. I'm a 2L and I'm clerking part-time at a big law firm during the year. The clerkship would last until I graduate from law school, and I've accepted a summer offer from another big firm. I plan to resign from my current position before finals week. In addition to the senior 2-week notice, What else should I do not to burn the bridge? Should I call Zoom the partner at HR before sending my resignation email? Should I email over my practice group? Any comments would be greatly appreciated. So if you're a 2L and just clerking and working part-time, no, I don't think there's any need to email everyone and tell them what you're doing, especially if you're going to a better firm. Then that's just saying, I've got a job with a better firm than you, haha, see you later. And that's likely to upset them. And I would tell them how much you enjoyed the job. I wouldn't even volunteer where you're going, and I would just say thank you. I don't think you need to call and Zoom the partner before sending a resignation email. I just think you need to tell them that you're leaving and going to a new firm, or you're taking a job, you have a summer associate job that you're taking, and tell them that your last day is going to be in a few weeks. And that's all I would do. And if you want to work with them during the school year as a 3L, say, I'd love to work with you as a 3L as well. But yeah, if you're working for one partner, you can certainly tell them, or you can just tell HR, depending on your relationship. I don't think I would email everyone in the department. I would just be very low key about it and not make an issue out of it and be very nice. And then when you want to come back, contact them again. But as a 2L working part-time, I don't think that they're, as you are, but I don't think a ton of attention to people coming and going. So I just would be very careful. And I certainly would not volunteer where I'm going. Or if you do, that's fine. But if they ask, you can tell them. But anytime you're moving on to something better, you just need to be careful, because they may think that you don't want to go back there because you're working at a better firm. And it would be great if you didn't have a good opportunity, time at the summer to ask them for a full-time job, or tell them you want to interview there with them in the future, even if you don't think that's a possibility. Right now, you just never know. Things can always change. Okay, let me see here. Okay, so here's an interesting question. Okay, for a law student, what's the best time to reach out to legal recruiters? Is 1L too early? First of all, you should never contact a legal recruiter like myself, like a private legal recruiter, meaning that's what I'm, this is a legal placement firm, but in terms of legal recruiters inside of law firm, oh, I see. When's the best time to ingratiate myself with a recruiter and cultivate a relationship? It really, you don't really need to have a relationship, cultivate a relationship with a recruiter. I don't know that you certainly can, and I would, but most recruiters, the problem is it's an unusual business in a lot of respects. But most recruiters it's not myself, but a lot of them they're like salespeople. So I don't know if real estate's a good way to moving between transactions and doing things, and so they're happy to talk to people and so forth, but they tend not to, most of them, I'm not saying myself, but a lot of them don't have a lot of time because they're always working and that kind of stuff with this stuff. I don't know that a law student needs a relationship with a recruiter. Now, if you're recruiters, like I have relatives that are attorneys and I speak to people that are thinking about going to law school and stuff all the time, then it's useful to ask them questions, because they can actually help you from making a lot of career mistakes, because what they see from the inside what people do and the mistakes they make. Asking recruiters questions is very smart. And I'll tell you a funny story. When I was in college, for whatever reason, I don't remember what the reason was, but I chose where I wanted to go to law school when I was like a 1L, because someone that I knew that I looked up to went to that law school. So I literally started calling the admissions office of the law school and asking them questions about things I should do and classes I should take and everything. And they couldn't believe it. They'd never seen anything like it. But that actually was a smart thing to do, because then I got into that law school. And at the time, I think they had, 5 or 6% acceptance rate from out of staters. I don't know. But so I was lucky, and that helped me because I got to know people. So if you ask recruiters questions and call them and ask them or talk to them about things you want to do with your career, that would be how I would use my time. I don't think most recruiters are going to want to meet with a law student stuff, but if they do talk to you, that would probably be a good way of doing things. And just any type of information you can get. And recruiters they know who's marketable and who's not. So everybody out there is just many times employing the wrong tactics, making the wrong decisions. And if they had advice about what to do, they would be much better off. So that's how I'd recommend using recruiters. Recruiters aren't necessary for you to have a connection with to get a job, really, as a young attorney, as like a 1L or 2L or 3L even. It depends on the recruiter you use, but the best ones can actually position you as a good candidate, like an attorney would position a client. And that's really what they do. And they know what can work. And so there's a lot of good things about recruiters. There's also a lot of bad things about bad recruiters. But in general, I would recommend asking them questions and then learning from the recruiters that you are interested in while you're young, and reading what they write and that sort of thing until you get out of school and so forth. But yeah, you don't need a relationship with a recruiter right now. And then a lot of people do have long-term relationships with recruiters when they get out. But ideally, you'll join a firm or an employer, and you'll stay there for your whole career, and we'll never need a recruiter. So that's really the kind of the ideal that people can follow. Okay, I'm a life science patent attorney with 20 years of experience that includes managing global patent portfolios for 2 multinationals. Wow, soup to nuts in-house counsel at a small pharma company where I drafted foundational patent applications, developed ICE strategy, $250 million despite difficult patent situation. I get interviews but no offers. I'm 59. What am I doing? Okay, so I don't know what you're doing wrong. I would read about interviewing and so forth. 59 is obviously not too old. You're coming from in-house. You should have plenty of experience that could be transitionable to a law firm. Actually, no. Okay, so here's what's going on. I think. So law firms are looking, and this is actually a good question that this person asked. This is actually very interesting. So this person, most law firms and companies are looking for either generals or soldiers. And I've written an article of the week, actually not this week, it's coming out next week. It's about the ability to manage attorneys. And I hope everyone reads it. It's not this week, but it's next week. But it's about what types of attorneys are manageable and not what types of attorneys are not manageable. But most law firms are looking for generals or soldiers. And so a general is someone who gives orders, comes up with strategy, supervises, that sort of thing. And then a soldier follows orders, does work, that sort of thing. So if you think about if you were running, let's just put it this way. So if you were running a business mowing lawns, and you would tell people to do certain tasks. You'd say, you do the edging, you do the mowing. I need you to gas up the trucks and all this kind of thing. And then you would have all your workers, and you would say, I need you to mow the backyard. I need you to go get the weed whacker and do this. I need you to do this. And if all your soldiers were saying, why would I do that? I've formerly supervised a crew of eight trucks doing lawn mowing, and I do this and I do that, and let me supervise. So that's the problem when soldiers start trying to be generals. And if a general becomes a soldier, then everyone's just got there. So this person is a life science patent attorney, and the things that this person's saying. So if you look at this, and I'm just showing you, and I'm not trying to be rude to anyone here, but this person's saying they manage patent for multinationals, soup to nuts in-house counsel. They developed an IP strategy and raised $250 million. So this person is a certain type of skill, and really the only thing they say 1, 2, 3 things here, and then they say this 4th thing, which is more related to being, I'm going to put green, more related to being a soldier. So what's happening with you is that you're very proud of all of your supervisory work and so forth, and which you rightly should be. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, what's happening is you may be interviewing for jobs, and they may just want someone who can do patent work. And so if you've done all this stuff, they're going to think, well, he's not going to be happy, or she's not going to be happy doing that. They're going to think that maybe you can't be managed because you're used to managing other people. They're going to think that you're going to want to go in-house and work for a larger patent company or someplace where you're going to get more experience if it's just a job. And they're going to think if it's just drafting patents, that you're not going to want the job. So anybody who's portraying themselves to do a certain type of job needs to be able to portray themselves for the role they're interviewing for. So if you're interviewing for a biotech company that's a new biotech company, you may be too old. 59 may be too old if it's an up-and-coming new biotech company that needs someone to lead them, or it may not be. I don't know, but it depends on the biotech company. But you need to be able to come across as either a soldier or general. My sense is that you're probably coming across as too much of a general for jobs that are looking for soldiers, because I can tell you a couple things that the patent attorneys are in demand for the most part, and then you should be able to find some sort of job where you're at least drafting patents, which would be a soldier job. But the only other thing I would say is you said you're a life science patent attorney. So that's actually not good. And I don't want to bore everyone on this call with too much information about what this person is doing. But life sciences patent work typically takes place in Boston and San Diego, and then lesser extent Palo Alto, and those are the main markets. And so the problem is most patent work is related to hard IP, which is electrical and all that sort of thing, the software. So that's the problem. So there's very few life sciences jobs. So that's the issue that you're having. There's just not as much information out there. Unless you're unless you're concentrating on these markets, you can also maybe throw in Orange County. It's not going to be easy for you. Anytime I work with a patent attorney, though, if you can come across and you're interested in working in a law firm, then you should be able to get a job. There's thousands of small patent firms all over the country that do life sciences patent work. There's also thousands of small companies. So you just need to target those people. And you don't necessarily want to be applying to jobs. You should apply to places that have openings or not have had openings in the past, or are just do that kind of work. And that would be how you want to do it. But you need to work a lot hard at your job search. Someone will definitely hire you. You can get hired as a general in a small pharma company, which would be all I would target. I would find every small pharma company in the country, because that's going to take care of your life sciences. And I would apply to every single one of them and that I could find. That's what I would do. And regardless of whether they have an opening, because your experience is probably in-house. If you want to work in a law firm, I would apply to every single law firm with life science patent attorneys I could in the country, starting mainly with smaller ones. I'm trying to help you because you've been unemployed for 3 years and you definitely can get a job, but those are what you need to do. And if you do that, you shouldn't have a problem. In terms of when you interview, you need to be very careful about coming across as a general, because you're used to being the expert and so forth. You need to come across as a soldier who will follow orders and get things done and be on call and eager to work. I hope that helps. But that's okay. Let's see here. Answer live. This next question is, what area of law do you see the most promising over the next 5 to 10 years? So a couple things. So attorneys, the first thing is, it doesn't matter what branch of law you practice for the most part. There's certain branches of law that are good, and there's certain ones that are bad. But I was just looking at, just see here real quickly, practice areas today. Give me 1 second here. Let me just see here. In terms of practice areas. So many times when you're looking at practice areas and trying to decide which ones are the best, and these are just practice areas, this is the kind of stuff I do all day, by the way, and that you're trying to work on, there's certain practice areas that are better than others. You're generally going to be the most employable when you're in niche practice areas for the most part, and niche is always better than major practice areas. So for example, in litigation right now, let me just say, alcohol and beverage law, probably not a great practice area. It's too niche, and there's just not a lot of people doing it. It's not an easy place to get a job. Antitrust is a difficult practice area because it's too large of a practice area. It's not a great practice area. But in terms of, I don't want to get into that. I'd be here all day if I was explaining this stuff to you. Construction is a great practice area. I think that's one of the strongest ones. There's a huge demand for construction attorneys, and construction attorneys have always done very well. Securities, corporate is generally always pretty good. Corporate generalists can also go in-house, so corporate's always a good position. Securities and capital markets can go up and down depending on the stock market and be difficult. Private equity and venture capital are usually always pretty good. M&A is always good. So most forms of corporate work are good. Finance is also project finance is a tough one just because it's tough when you get more senior. Let's see, I'm just trying to find the best ones for you guys. Any form of employment law is always good. So those practice areas are good. Family law is a great practice area right now. It's great all over. Let's see here. Healthcare is usually always very good. Anybody that does healthcare is always doing well. Immigration is an excellent practice area. Insurance defense is always good. Insurance coverage is usually pretty good. Intellectual property litigation is not good. Let me just see here. Licensing, not good. And I could explain all the reasons to you, but you're asking me which ones I believe. Arbitration, never good, very difficult. Trademark, very difficult. So when you get into litigation, a lot of people want to do litigation. And honestly, the most active practice areas in litigation are the hardest jobs to get tend to be in general commercial litigation. The ones that I've seen are the easiest and a good experience. It depends on you, but I work with every type of attorney. So I'm not just working with people from Vault 20 firms and stuff. The people that get the most interviews as litigators in New York City are medical malpractice attorneys. Labor and employment attorneys get a lot of interviews. Workers' compensation attorneys get a lot of interviews. Things like when you start getting into things that land use and zoning gets a lot of interviews. Let's see, product liability gets a lot of interviews. Let's see, personal injury gets a lot of interviews. Trust and estates gets a lot of interviews. So those are some of the ones that I think are better. Any type of real estate litigation, no. But those are some of the practice areas. So the practice areas that I see doing the best, and if I was an attorney, it depends on if you're let me just see here. I'm just looking for litigation rules. Give me 1 second. Depends really if you're what type of attorney you want to be. If you want to be if you have a choice between consumer facing types of law, and then you have a choice of corporate facing types of law. So I personally think that the ones that are going to do the best over the next several years are going to be consumer facing. And that's not something typically that attorneys go into. Most attorneys want to go into working for large firms and that sort of thing. I'm just trying to look if I did a thing here, a presentation on consumer versus have it open here. But there's a difference between consumer facing law and there's a difference between law that's more faced. Let me just see here. I actually have the document. Let me just open it here real quickly. Give me 1 second. I just want you guys to see it here. Okay, I'm going to do consumer versus, give me 1 second. Maybe it's not on this document. Yeah, well, you have consumer facing practice areas and then you have non-consumer practice areas. So let me just show you this here real quickly. And the areas of ones that I personally see where the most growth is going to happen. Most people that go to like top law schools want to do non-consumer practice area practice. So they want to work in things representing companies. And these are kind of areas where companies can continually write big checks and so forth. So this is what happens with people from top law schools. They typically go into these practice areas and that's perfectly fine. But it can be much more difficult sometimes to get ahead in these practice areas than it can in others. And then these are consumer-facing practice areas, which are family law, immigration, bankruptcy, personal injury. So I really see a lot of growth in a lot of these consumer-facing practice areas. And I know I used to practice at Quinn Emanuel when I got out of law school, and then I was going through a divorce, and the attorney that sued me, or my wife's attorney, had also worked at Quinn Emanuel, and he went to Stanford Law School and was a family law attorney. That's a very good practice area. You can make a lot of money, but you can work on lots of different types of cases, and it's actually very sophisticated litigation, depending on how you do it. And that's a good practice area. And immigration's a good practice area. I know someone that graduated from a 4th-tier law school that's doing immigration law. And by the time she was in her early 30s, without ever having worked in a law firm, her law firm was grossing $25 million a year. And that's a lot of money. This is a big business. You can do very well doing that. A lot of people do very well with personal injury. A lot of people do very well with trust in the estates. So especially when you take people with a lot of intellectual firepower and you start putting them in these consumer practice areas, like they can do very well. Or you can learn how to do these practice areas. So the mistake that a lot of people from top law firms make or top law schools make is they think these are the only practice areas that you need to go into representing companies. So they think you need to only be in these big practice areas doing commercial litigation, and that would be litigation, all this sort of thing. So I actually like the consumer practice areas. And if it was me and I was a young attorney or I was in law school, I would seriously think about some of these consumer facing practice areas, which are considered non-prestigious, but if you can build a brand for yourself and a name and have employment stability, then you'll do very well. And the thing I don't like about a lot of these non-consumer facing, which are I would call corporate facing, deep pocket clients, are that the law firms are huge. It's very difficult to advance in them. You don't learn business skills a lot of times. Like the business skills, someone that's in family law learns to bring in clients, they learn to build, they learn to run a practice, but you just become a worker bee. And many times you don't have any real skills. So if it was me, just me talking, I would seriously think about non-consumer practice areas as some of the best things to get into in the future. I can't say enough positive things and tell you enough success stories about people that have done that as opposed to stuck with the same level of work that you put into yourself doing a non-consumer practice area. If you put that into a consumer practice area, you can literally just kick it out of the park and you'll have your own business many times doing that too. That's, to me, is exciting. I'm sorry to go off so much on that, but it's something that I really, okay, give me 1 second here, another question. And I hope you guys take my advice on some of this stuff, because it could, honestly, any of these things that you're learning right now just learning one of them could change your life. And I've seen so many people have so much happiness and success practicing law just by switching from a consumer to a non-consumer. Okay, I'm working as a firm doing clerk my last semester and aiming to be an associate in the future. My question is about the billing mindset. For some reason, I feel badly about billing for everything. For example, taking 10 hours to research or 10 hours for a meeting. I feel bad for the client and the firm. I feel tempted to reduce my hours to work on my own time firm, I currently get paid hourly as a part-timer. I'm working to get over this. I know it's weird, but do you have any tips? Okay, so it sounds like you're billing the client and the firm. The firm is marking up your time. If you're working in a firm and they're paying you, I don't know how much they're paying you, but say they're paying you $30 an hour, they're probably charging $120 an hour for your services. And so paying you and charging clients. So I would not feel bad for the firm that you're billing them for their time. The other thing I would say is you shouldn't feel bad for the clients either. So some of these clients are just, it depends on the size of the firm. Some of the clients are probably very large clients, and major clients generate, billions and billions of dollars in profits are not something you necessarily need to feel sorry for. This is just what it is. And even if you are taking 10 hours to research something, many times the law firm will realize that is too much time and that you may not have been efficient with your time, and the partners will write that time off. So there's nothing really to worry about with that, and I wouldn't get upset about that. But just remember, most of the clients are very large, and money and legal bills are just built into their cost of doing business. So I wouldn't feel bad about them. It was funny, I had some people over for dinner the other night, and I have this dog, this French bulldog, and the French bulldog, if you don't touch him the right way, or he gets mad, he just attacks you. But then a fun way, but he's actually very mad. And the guy said to me, "You must be a nice person," because he thinks he's the alpha dog, and he does. So he goes around the house. And so someone taught me, you just have to put him on his back. And anytime he does that, and he'll stop. And it actually worked. So now he gets mad. But the point is that with this stuff, you sound like a very nice person feeling guilty, but this is just the way the business works. And you have to realize that you have value, and the time that you've spent becoming an attorney or that you are spending becoming an attorney and doing this work has value. And you're providing value to someone, and there's a cost to it. Okay. Can you talk more? This is a good question too. More about the question, can you be managed? What are they asking for aside if you listen to and follow instruction? And if that's the whole protection, how can I use that applying to jobs? Okay, so if you look up on BCG, there are articles about can you be managed and so forth. And then there's a very long one that I'm coming out with next week about can you be managed? And let me just do one thing real quickly. Give me 1 second. Well, I'm not going to pull it up. But basically, can you be managed means, will you follow instructions? Will you listen to superiors? Will you do your own thing, or will you look up to people? Will you get along and that sort of thing? So there's a whole lot that goes into it. And because there's so much, I'm going to pull up a little bit that I did from an article that I did this week. And if I can find it, just give me 1 second here and go over that with you, because it is a good question. Let me just see here, apps. And it's a very good question. If I can find it, I may not be able to find it. Let's see here. I did find it. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can tell. And this is, let me just see if I have all these lined out here. Some examples of an attorney that can be managed. So someone that can be managed, typically their goal is to work with other people, and that you would have to understand is that your long-term goal? And if it is, then that comes through. And there are people that don't want that. There's people that want promotion, meaning it's important to them to be recognized by others. And there's people that don't care and are independent. And these are some kind of most important things. And the most important, I think, is the first one. The long-term goal is to work for other people. So you just have to look at it that way. And you can tell many times the warning signs and of kind of people that are not going to be manageable. And these are just some examples. And these may be some people when threatening to quit and come back, never worked in hierarchical environments, teaching, things like that, desiring to work at home and control your own environment, resisting training and feedback. There's a lot of people that resist training and feedback. That's very common. And then trying to be in situations where you're not accountable, and that sort of thing. So this is actually an article that I did for law firms, but there's all sorts of types of people that can't be managed. And I'm just going to give you some examples here. There's other examples, which are, I worked with men that were sexist and women couldn't manage them. I worked with women that couldn't work with men. There's all sorts of different types of people that can be manageable and are not manageable. And there's things that many times that an unmanageable attorney will say that you can pick up on a lot of times. And they'll say things like, in interviews, they may say they're asking work, morale's low, bad news about the firm, all these sorts of things. So these are ways law firms will pick up if you're manageable or not. And being manageable just means that every law firm to a great extent needs pretty much all soldiers. There's generals in law firms, but even the type of general that works in a law firm as a partner is typically someone that's very dependent on the opinions of others and their other partners and will follow orders and be in line and so forth. You just need to decide what type of person you are and what's important to you. But if you're not manageable, then it's not a good idea for you in most cases to be in a law firm. It's just not the kind of place you should be. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's certain people that are cut out for law firms and certain people that aren't. But these sorts of things, where you don't want to work weekends, you don't want to, people that are part of groups just want to be part of groups, and they want to do what other people want them to, and their self-esteem is dependent on that. And people that aren't. I personally don't know that I would be manageable in a law firm. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It would certainly be a bad thing for a law firm. It would be difficult for them to manage me. So if you're not manageable in a law firm, you need to be doing something else and understand that. And this is something that takes a lot of people some time to understand. And it just sort of, a dog needs to be trained, a horse needs to be broken in. So many times when attorneys are young, it's difficult for them to manage. But even when attorneys get older, if the law firm can't manage them and they won't accept their compensation or they won't do things that the law firm wants them to, older attorneys get fired all the time because they're not manageable. Younger attorneys get fired because they're not manageable. It's actually probably more common for older attorney to lose their job because they're not manageable. Partners get fired because they undermine other partners and they don't follow directions, or they won't get along. They won't do stuff that's asked for them. They won't be on committees. They won't go on client pitches with attorneys they don't like. And that's all stuff that's not manageable. So regardless of the stage of your career you're in, if you want to be part of a group, you have to be manageable and you have to learn all this stuff. And it's important. And this is how they make decisions about who they're going to have. If you're going to be a summer associate this summer somewhere, they're going to decide who's going to work there based on who they perceive is going to be manageable and fall into line. That's really what they're doing. They already know if you have good grades that you probably can do the work. If they hired you, they just want to see if you can be managed. And this is stuff that no one teaches. I'm glad you're on this call, everyone here, and learning this, but this is extremely important stuff. And again, the article will be coming out next week, and I may even cover it in our call next week because it's that important, but those are some of the things. Okay, let's see. So thank you for that question. And if you guys give me one quick second, I'm just going to grab a drink here and refill my coffee, and I will be back. So just like maybe 1.5 minutes. Okay, so let's see. Here's another in-house counsel question. 55-year-old laid off in-house counsel from a small family independent oil and gas company for 9.5 years. Okay, so I think if I was a in-house counsel, I think that it's actually very easy for in-house counsel to get jobs. And I think that a lot of people go about it the wrong way. So 55, I don't think is too old, but in oil and gas, so you had oil and gas experience, oil and gas company, and then that kind of one of the skids. So there's different types of energy work you could potentially do. I'm not going to get into that. I'm assuming you're probably in Texas or something along those lines, but so small firms, you're probably going about it in the wrong way. If it was me, what I would do is I would find any company anytime there's a bust in some industry like oil and gas, then typically there's some sort of work that's being done that comes off of that elsewhere. So I don't know what that is or where you are, but I would recommend trying to apply to other types of in-house counsel other types of in-house counsel roles in companies all over whatever part of the country you're in, small and large companies, because almost all law firms or almost all companies out there have law firms. And I'll just tell you a quick story and then I'll move on. You can reach the conclusions you want from it. So I had a friend that was once working for a medical company, and he was a corporate attorney, and he was there for 3 months and then lost his position. And so what I recommended to him was he wanted to work in-house. And so I basically had the research and I printed out letters for him to probably 1,500 companies around Los Angeles that just did a variety of different things. They were restaurant companies and he got several jobs in-house very quickly. And so the companies are always opportunistically hiring. They're hiring for people to do all sorts of different things and with different experience. And just because you have oil and gas experience doesn't mean you can't do other types of work. If you were doing oil and gas, you were probably doing contracts and titles and real estate related stuff. I don't know exactly what you were doing, but there are other employers out there that could use you, and reaching out to them proactively would be important. I hire more than half the people that I hire in our company are for people that we don't even have jobs for. Because someone comes along that looks like it would be a good fit. So that's how I would go about doing my search. That's the same thing that I also recommend to attorneys looking for jobs inside of law firms. So law firms opportunistically hire. So the problem is if you're looking for oil and gas jobs online, all you're doing are competing with the same people that are looking at the same jobs or in the same position as you. So you need to look at places that don't have openings. So here's an example. And I want to make this for everyone because this is hopefully helpful. So example, oil, gas attorneys, laid off, 500 plus, due to slowdown. Okay, so let's say 1,000. It's probably more than that. Just say 1,000 plus due to slowdown. Oil and gas. What happens? 200 plus applications. Okay, so let's say you are in Houston. Oh, it's going to be more than 25. But this is a way to think about it. It's something along this lines. And then if you do get these interviews, you have a much better chance of getting a job. Or maybe there's 800 companies. Let's just say 800 companies and doing oil and gas and others, 7 interviews. This is how you think about it. You have to think in terms of marketing and business and so forth. And everyone needs to do this with their applications to get jobs in law firms too. So it just works that way. And this is how to think about it. So that's how I would do things if I was an oil and gas attorney that had lost my job. I would probably find all the companies in Houston and Midland and Austin and everything that do it. I would contact them proactively. I would not worry about trying to get jobs in the few places that actually have openings in a slow market, and I do things that way. This is using a very good tactic for your strategy of staying employed. So I hope that helps, but that's really what I would do. Okay, let's see here. Okay, all great questions, by the way. I really appreciate all these. Okay. What advice can you give for patent prosecutors having stronger tech skills than average with advanced employment in light of the fact that many tech firms are careful with the number of patents, not so much the quality of the patents that they get? Yeah, so the best patent prosecutors, if you have the best degrees and the stronger technical skills, then you want to try to get jobs in the best patent firms possible. You can get a list of the best patent firms on BCG, best patent. But the largest clients, the largest clients are always going to want the people with the strongest tech skills. So smaller clients and tech firms with smaller budgets are probably not going to be your best fit. So I would try to work in the best patent firms, and there's a lot of very good patent firms out there, and many do care about the quality of patents. You're right that a lot of them don't, but the best patent firms do. And it's very easy to get patent prosecution jobs, by the way. There's so many jobs out there. There's so many firms that do it. There's such a dearth of patent prosecutors, and I would look at really for the best and the highest ranked patent firms. So you can find those on the BCG law firm rankings. There's also, there's Chambers, there's Vault, there's News. Now there's IP specific rankings. So find the best patent firms, and that's where I would try to work. And you can do that for all practice areas if you have really good skills. But that's really the way you're going to find people that are the biggest clients are always going to want you to go deep and to learn to do as much work as you possibly can in patents. So that is how I would recommend what I would recommend doing. Okay. Another great question. Thanks for these questions. I love these questions. I'm just very impressed with them today. Let's see here. Every single question has been great. I'm going to a smaller firm out of law school. What kind of litigation should I focus on to transition to a larger firm? Is being a plaintiff side attorney in class action something that large firms will not be interested in? But yes. If you want to, no, they will not be not interested. So large firms typically large firms do commercial litigation for the most part, or sometimes they do, but they mainly only do defense. And the commercial litigation means representing companies. So they typically represent companies. I was looking at these practice area, let me just see here, practice area list earlier with you guys. And so if you were doing litigation, anything that's related to plaintiffs is not good. And typically anything that's consumer facing is not good for anything to do with, so you want to avoid any type of consumer facing litigation, avoid defense, avoid insurance defense, and then avoid plaintiff's litigation. And this is important to understand. And I'd like to do a whole separate presentation on litigation at some point in the future, because I've been really, over the past couple of weeks, I've been studying litigation, how to talk about it to people in a lot of different ways. And most attorneys are litigation, so I'll spend a little time on it right now. But the problem with when you represent consumers, for the most part, consumers do not have large budgets, and neither do insurance companies. So what happens is they push out work very quickly. The work comes out extremely fast, and it's not well researched, without typos and so forth. et cetera. And so large law firms and then typically will win. When a large law firm goes up against a consumer law firm, they will typically win because they will write better motions, they will impress judges, and so forth. So when you represent consumers, you typically will pick up bad habits, and the same thing with insurance companies. And you will not be as strong of an attorney, not that you're not capable of, but the training, the consumers do not have big budgets and insurance companies do not have large budgets. When you represent companies and large companies represent companies, the companies have large budgets to win and they get sued all the time, and want to win, and they hire the best attorneys. And that means long hours, memos, that sort of thing. Long hours, memos, etc. Research, and the best work product. So that's why large law firms almost always, when they get involved, they beat smaller law firms because they have a larger budget and they can fight and they can hire smarter people to pick up mistakes and so forth that you make and impress judges more. It's just the way it works. People with money typically win when it comes to litigation. So if you get training in litigation, you're often better off getting trained to work with companies first, and you'll do better. Now, you asked a question about personal injury. So personal injury is not that complex of a branch of law. And the reason it's not that complex is because in commercial litigation, what you're doing is you're proving things like the existence of a contract, the meeting of the minds, the violation of contract terms, that it was illegal or not legal, and so forth. That personal injury is not complex. All you have to do is prove the injury and damages. So once a personal injury person gets a case, they can pretty much get everything to trial unless the injury didn't happen. Whereas when someone is representing a company, the companies can get cases filed by consumers for product liability or whatever, dismissed most of the time. But if you're injured, if a camera that's filming me right now suddenly explodes, and it happened, and there's nothing, unless I cause the camera to explode, there's no fault at issue. So personal injury is fairly simplistic in terms of the type of work. Now it can be much more complex, but attorneys that are trained to work with companies with large budgets learn better skills. And that's why if you become a plaintiff's litigator, a lot of people dream of that and stuff, doing that right out of school. It's not necessarily going to make you the best attorney because you need to learn a lot of skills. When I used to practice law, I would come up against, I worked with this guy named John Vandekamp, who's no longer alive, but one of his friends owned a auto insurance company, and he let young associates sometimes take cases just for fun and defending them. And I would get, literally, I'm not kidding, this is just kind of an example, I would get briefs and stuff, the opposing side that would look like this. They would just break off and there would be the writing would be this bad. And it's hard to believe, but things just wouldn't make sense, ideally. And just sentences that don't make sense and all sorts of stuff, because it's stuff like that. It wouldn't make sense. And so the reason is because they just don't have the time and they work very fast and they don't, and whereas the really good defense attorneys, they can. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of the type of people you train with. The larger the clients you learn under and the more budget there is, the better you're going to be in the long run. And those are how you can make career decisions. And someone that goes to New York City is going to expect a higher quality of work if it's an out-of-state company than someone that's working with their local firm many times. Okay, let me see this question. I hope that helps. Okay, let's see. Criminal law. Okay, I'm going to come back to that question because I'm not sure what it is. I think it might be, okay. I think this, I don't know what this one is, but this is one right here. I was unable to secure an associate position mid-big law while in law school. I'm currently clerking. I want to realistically assess my chances of certain now. Okay, so yeah, anybody can always move up from a small firm to a big firm or to a mid-sized to a large firm. And it doesn't really matter who you are, but you can do it all throughout your career. Just keeping in mind that what controls it when you're young. What controls it? Young is your past controls, which is your school, jobs, and so forth. And then when you're older is experience and how much money. If you get older and you want to bring in business and so forth. So if I was clerking and trying to go directly from a clerkship to a mid-sized to large firm, I would try to have the best clerkship I could. So if you're doing a state clerk, it just depends. So state court clerkship, you can apply locally many times, locally around the judge to mid-sized to large firms. If you're doing a federal clerkship, you can almost always transition from district to all over the country. If you're doing state court and you can go to an appellate. And then from appellate, you could go to a, what do you call it, a Supreme Court of the state, Supreme Court of state. If I was just doing a trial court in a state, I would probably try to go to maybe try to get a job locally, meaning if I was looking for a local judge, I would try to work in a local mid-sized firm to a larger firm. If I was clerking in an appellate, same thing. But maybe in around the state. And if I was clerking for a Supreme Court in the state, you could go to mid-sized or larger firms. So you can always transition after a clerkship into a job. Now, it's better if you have had a job before. At this point, you'll be able to go in and talk about litigation and have experience and so forth. So I think you would probably do very well if you were trying to transition right now into a new firm. So that's how I would handle things if it was me. I would try to work on it that way with the clerkship. But yeah, you can definitely do it. You just need to apply to a lot of places also, which is a lesson I gave a little while ago. Okay, more great questions. Jeez, love these questions. Okay, if you're in a corporate-facing specialty and would like to change to something like family law, how would you recommend learning that area of law? So my advice would probably be to take some CLEs and so forth and say you're interested in it, or talk to local family law attorneys and go out and ask for informational interviews in whatever market you're in, and a lot of them would be happy to talk to you. Many state bars have mentors and so forth, and you want to have a reason for doing something and being interested in that branch of law. So you typically want to have a reason why. It's very common. I work with attorneys in major markets all the time that want to transition into family law from being a corporate attorney and other types of attorneys. You definitely can do that. It's not difficult. But typically, and you can even apply for those jobs too if you're in a major law firm. Family law attorneys may, if you get them in the right frame of mind, they may just bring you in and talk to you. The nice thing about family law that's interesting is family law is litigation, and then it's corporate because you're working for businesses and so forth and business people, evaluating those sort of things. It's tax for the same reason. It's just a lot of different things, and it's personal, and it can also be criminal law. So it can be a lot of different things. And family law is an interesting area of practice. And honestly, it's coming from a recruiter. It's probably, in my opinion, one of the most popular practice areas right now. And there's a lot of demand for people to do it. And people, surprisingly, I don't say this about most practice areas, but there's enough demand where family law attorneys are interested in people going over to the other side. I mean, where they're interested in people switching practice areas, which typically doesn't happen in most. Someone asked if insurance coverage is a good practice area of law. It's an excellent area of law. There's not a lot of people that do it. Many people think it's boring, but if you don't think it's boring, then it's something that you would like. Insurance coverage, by the way, involves things like if a building, say a building falls down, you have to decide who's responsible. Is the person that made the building fall down responsible? Is the property owner responsible because the property owner owns the property? And then when people are injured, who's responsible for that? So insurance coverage attorneys will apportion blame, and they'll take the side of the insurance company based on different insurance contracts and argue that out. And it's a very good area of the law. It's one of the few areas of law where if you become very good at it, where you're employable as you get more senior. So it's actually, many times you don't need business if you're good at it. And it's a very big area of the law. And attorneys do it from major firms, they do it from smaller firms, and it's a good area of the law. And this person says they're afraid of pigeonholing themselves into one area of the law, but at the same time, it's actually a pretty good area if you want to be pigeonholed in, because it does give you some employment stability, and it's a good skill to have. Let's see. Okay, this question is, what is the best way to apply for a position that isn't advertised, i.e. a smaller firm that doesn't have a formal program? The best way typically is to write the firm, and if you know someone at the firm, to write to them directly and to tell them why you're interested in it. So you may think you're interested in a certain practice area. You may be interested in a certain geographic location. You may know alumni from your school there. I recommend that everybody apply to all the summer jobs they can and work every summer if you can in a law firm, if that's what you want to do in the long term. The reason is because it's much easier to get a job in another law firm if you've summered after your first summer and if you summered after your second summer in a law firm. And so it just shows interest in that. And even if it's not called a summer associate position and paying that kind of money, just getting the experience, even if it's not well paid, is a great idea. That's what I would recommend. But try to do it in a practice this area that you're interested in. So if you're interested in being a corporate attorney, try to apply to firms that do corporate so you can get some exposure to corporate work. If you want to be an IP attorney, the same thing. Don't just apply to random firms. You should know what they're doing, and you should have an idea of what you want to do. If you don't know what you want to do, then that's fine. But then you also have to decide between doing consumer versus corporate versus commercial facing practice here, and then if you do plaintiff versus defense, because if you do plaintiff, that's going to put you in one hole, and if you do defense, that's going to put you in another one. Do you want to work in a consumer firm, or do you want to do plaintiffs or defense? Do you want to do that? So if you're trying to work in a big firm, then you need to make sure it's commercial facing, meaning the larger the company, the better. The same thing with litigation, doing plaintiff versus defense. Okay, let's see here. Working through all these questions, some of the recent ones, and then I'll get to some older ones in a minute. Earlier, you mentioned clerkships have tactical mistakes that led to not getting a job with a large firm or being asked to leave. Can a clerkship after law school help make up for a lack of a summer associate position and resume? Yes. I also have, I'm sorry, that's not the same thing. Yes, they can. Clerkships are great. If I was an attorney and I didn't have a summer associate position for whatever reason, and even at this point of the year, I would write every firm I could all over the market I was from and other markets to try to get a job, because a summer associate position, even if it's not called that, is important. You can certainly get a summer associate job or a summer job with a small firm and still get into a large firm in your third year. A lot of times it depends on the market, but you definitely can. But clerkships are great. If you didn't get a job after your second summer and you're in your third year of law school, you should apply to clerk in every market you possibly can, because especially for a federal district court clerkship or something along those lines. And the qualifications to work in those can vary across the board, but that can definitely help you. Once you do a clerkship, the benefit of doing a clerkship is that you tend to be working very closely with the judge, much more closely than you might even be working with an attorney in a law firm. And they'll teach you all sorts of writing skills and so forth that you never. I was very lucky to have gotten a clerkship, because I learned so much, and I just applied for one off at a fluke. And I didn't even know really what it was. I just knew people were doing them, and I sent letters to, I don't know, to 10 or 11 federal judges in Michigan, and got a position with one, and within probably a week. And it was a great thing, because he taught me a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have learned normally. So you getting a clerkship can be very helpful for you, and it can make you a much better attorney. And certainly those skills come in useful when you apply to firms, and it can fix the mistake of not getting a job. But if you don't have a job right now and you want to work in the summer, you should go all out and just do whatever you can to try to get one, even if it means working for minimum wage or something in a law firm. It's just getting the experience is important, because it shows you may want to do that in the future. Let's see here. Okay, let me get some more questions. Searching for a summer associate position, and have email partners asking about the price. I'm being ghosted about 15 emails. I'm worried they're reaching in late in the game. March and asking about it. It makes me look unserious. I'm wasting my time. No, you're not. And 15 emails is not being ghosted. If you're Home Depot and you want to sell some mops, you're gonna probably send out 25,000 inserts into a mailbox, for each 10 mops you sell. You're going to bring people in the store for other stuff, but so you need to start thinking about much larger markets. Much larger mailings. You need to get in touch with a lot of people. When I represent candidates, I'm always trying to get them to talk to more people, because it's not that you're reaching out late in the game. It's just that you have to have a reason why you're reaching out. So maybe you say you want to work in your home market. So maybe if you grew up in Memphis and you're currently going to law school in New York, maybe you say, I want to return to Memphis. You can come up with all sorts of reasons that you want to work in those markets, or the practice area you want to work in. But you need to find some sort of thing. You need to increase your numbers. You need to contact a lot of people. Everybody here does. Who cares about rejection? No one takes it serious. Everyone gets rejected. It's not a big deal. Even if you applied to 15, you should probably have applied to realistically 150, and there'd be nothing wrong with 1,500. This is about survival and getting ahead and doing all sorts of things. So who's to say that trying to survive and getting yourself out there to more places is a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. This is survival of the fittest. And so don't let other people intimidate you and tell you not to apply to a lot of places. That's insane. That's not something you should be doing, because the only way to get a job is to have someone reach out to you. The other thing too is you have to remember there's the concept of, what is it called? Oh, the moving parade concept. And it's like this with you. You're like a moving parade. Let me just see. I don't know how to draw a parade, but I'll do it like this. Let me just see here. So a parade at any point in time is going to be at different locations, and meaning people are going to be ready to buy at different points in time. And so you have this parade here going across the screen and ready to buy. You don't know when someone's ready to buy. So ready to. So what that means essentially is the person might be ready to hire here, or they might be ready to hire here, or they might be ready to hire here. You just don't know. And your applications are coming in, but you, instead of applying then, you've been applying, you applied here and then you applied here. So just because you've reached these people at different points in time doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. And if you'd gotten one of these 15 emails here or here, maybe they were hiring several people at this point, you would have done well. So the concept of the moving parade is important because all it means is the market's constantly changing. And not only people ready to hire at different points, but one thing that it's funny, but I'll tell you a secret of what I do at BCG, and this has made me my candidates do very well. What I do is, so I'll apply to my initial application to a firm might be here, and they won't respond or they won't be interested. Then I'll follow up and I'll say, are you still interested? Are you still interested? Are you still interested? Here. And then all of a sudden I get them at this point. And then if they don't respond, if they don't respond after a couple months, then I'll come back here and I'll say, are you interested again? And they'll say nothing. And then I'll say, are you interested again? And so I'll just keep talking to the firm and trying to figure out to reach them at these different points in time. So now, if you're sending out a bunch of applications at one time, you could be talking about markets. This strategy means that my candidates that I work with as a recruiter get jobs because I'm always, even though there's a moving parade, I'm making sure that I'm there whenever the law firm actually is ready to hire. The other thing that I do that I recommend is firms hiring a market. Firms hiring a market. So that would be an individual firm, but firms hiring a market. So you might have, let's just go here, you might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I don't know, but you get the idea here. You have all these different firms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And I hope this is making sense to you guys. This is actually very important. It can change your career if you understand it. So at any point in time, there's maybe firms in market, at least in terms of ready to hire. You have all these firms in the market, and then you have firms that may be ready to hire at any point in time, if the right person comes along. And I wish people understood this. I've been trying to make this point my whole career to people, but no one seems to understand. It certainly works well for our candidates. It's just insane how. Okay, so these are firms in the market ready to hire if the right person comes along. So you have 25 firms in the market, and then say like firm number, let's say firm number 12 is ready to hire if the right person comes along, and then you have firm number 21 ready to hire if the right person comes along. No openings, by the way. And then these are all the firms in the market, and then typical applicant is something like this. The typical applicant will say, I like firm 5 and I like let's look at firm 5 and let's look at firm 16, 17, and 18. And that's what they say. They say that let me go read about these firms and tell you which ones that I think look good for me out of these 25 firms. I would have no way of knowing that firm number 12 and number 21 would hire if someone applied to them. No way of knowing. And this is one of the most important. If you understand this concept, it's going to change your career and your life if you follow this. Because I have gotten people that follow my advice doing this have gotten thousands of jobs. Other recruiters won't do this for you. No, they may, but I'm just saying that very few people will ever explain this to you the way I am right now. But in a typical market, you may have 25 firms. Out of 25 firms, you may have 2 that are ready to hire someone like you if the right person comes along. And what most people do is if you were to apply to all 25 firms right here, you would get a job because number 12 and number 21 would interview you. But the typical applicant will take a look at all these firms that may match what they're doing. And they may say, I don't like 25 because I read a bad Glassdoor review. And my friend works there and said this about this firm. And I just really don't like it for that reason. And so they find all these reasons to eliminate firms, and consequently, they're unemployed. And I don't like that. And I hope that if I was you, I would look at all the firms in the market at least the ones in the interview with if you don't have a job. This is the mistake that almost every attorney makes when they're looking for a job. And it's huge. I mean, it's cost more careers, it prevents more people from being employed. And it's something that several people on this call have brought up that they're actually doing, making this mistake. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that so many people are not working because they don't understand the simple rule. And instead they continue to apply to 5, 16, 17, and 18. And that hurts them. And the other thing that they do is they ready to hire no person, no opening, let's put no opening. Ready to hire if right person. If you take 25 typical firms, and then maybe you'll just have this one firm here. Maybe you'll have number 24 has an opening. So most people actually, the way they do things is they end up missing the openings in the market. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, and honestly, this concept there, I hope it's something that you guys think about. I'm in litigation, so Vault 20, and our firm is giving us no indication when we expect to return to the office. Do you have indication when big law returns? I read an article this morning that they're expecting to have everyone vaccinated by May 31st. I think that there'll be a lot of resistance to bringing people back to the office just because so many people are working at home. A lot of people are actually working out of state and so forth. So my feeling is that you probably in the office, I would say probably sometime this summer would be my thought. There was an article this morning in the paper saying that they expect everyone to be vaccinated by the end of May. I don't know if that's possible or not, but that's what they're saying. So that may happen. If it does, then okay. If I'm rejected post-interview, I really want to end up at some point, would it help at all to try to maintain contact with my interviewer, especially the interview department I want to be at? Is it better just to have a contact with someone else at the firm who shows my common qualities, me law school undergrad? I don't know that you need to maintain contact with anyone at the firm. That certainly is a thought and something that is not a bad idea. But at the same time, I think that typically when a law firm hires you, there's a certain amount of song and dance to it. And law firms want to hire people that they feel like that they have, that are the people that the law firm has to chase a little, if that makes sense. So just wanting somebody or liking somebody isn't always enough for them to like you back. So you just want to basically become as strong as an attorney as you can and as good of an attorney as you can. So then when you come back and see those people in the future, you realize that you have so much more to offer them, and maybe it's not even as good of a firm as you could work at in the past. So I would just work on making myself as good as I possibly can be, forgetting about the law firm. And there's thousands of law firms and there's thousands of places you can work. And then if you do want to work at them for some reason, then coming back in the long run. And I'm sure you've all had the experience of when you were younger, something looked very attractive to you. And then when you got older, it didn't look as attractive. So that's an example here that you may see in the future. When I was young, I thought working in certain law firms seemed like the be all end all to me. And now it seems like something for a lot of them that I wouldn't want to do, and others I would. But just because you're looking up to something right now doesn't mean that'll be the person you are in the future. I don't know having these contacts are important, but if you meet people through the course of your career, through practicing and so forth that are at those firms, there's nothing wrong with being in touch with them. Okay, let's see here. Wow, this is a great one. An earlier question, and I apologize I didn't get to it sooner. Okay, I have encountered the first major tactical obstacle in my career, and I'm not sure how to get past it. I went to a small college, but did well enough to get into a top-line law school. That's awesome. I've been reasonably well here and worked my first summer. However, I failed to convert my law firm callbacks this summer into an offer, and now I'm left without a job. I've applied to about 100 firms in many markets, large size, small, and got no traction. The firms that have expressed interest told me their programs are full, and I should reapply to 3L. I'm really at a loss and have no idea how to move forward. A summer associate job seems like an impossibility at this point, and I feel my question is, what tactical steps do I need to take from here? Should I reach out to smaller law firms without summer programs and ask if they'll hire me for the summer? Yes, you need to go all out. So that's what I would recommend. I would just say something along the lines of you need to go all out. One of the things that many law schools do is they control the interviewing process. And I think for the most part that works well. But sometimes people will only do a certain number of on-campus interviews. And then if they don't get something, nothing will materialize. So if that happens, the most important thing you can do is really go all out and find something on your own. So the most logical thing to do would be to apply to as many law firms as you possibly can. And I would try to do, if I don't know what market you're from or where you grew up, but always the market you grew up in is the most logical. market to apply to. If you grew up in Rochester, New York, you should apply to all the firms in Rochester, New York. If you grew up in, I don't know, Lawrence, Kansas, you should apply to law firms in Lawrence, Kansas if you're at a top 10 law school. You typically want to go to the markets. If you went to a small college, then apply to all the firms in the small college area. So the idea is you position yourself as someone that wants to go back to that market possibly, and then you decide at the end of the summer, if you don't want to stay there, to interview with firms on campus if that's what you want to do and work in larger firms. That's one option. The other option would be to try to work for the government or something, but I would just go all out. I don't think 100 law firms is enough. If 100 doesn't work, then I would try 1,000. I honestly, I don't, there's nothing wrong with sending 1,000 applications if you send 100. You just need to do everything that you can to get out there, and you need to try to connect with all the people you can. You need to ask your professors if they have any ideas, if there's anyone you're close to. Most attorneys aren't that close to professors in law school or students, but you need to do what you can. You need to really put in a lot of effort, and it's not too late, and you just need to go all out. The stupidest thing you can do, and this is this whole thing here that I've showed you, is you just need to understand. So just because the large programs are full doesn't mean you have to work in the large programs. And just remember also that everything is a race. So just because you're at one point in the race right now doesn't mean you're going to be there in the future. So you just need to make sure you move on and do whatever you can. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing how to interview and not doing well in an interview in your second summer. A lot of people don't get jobs and go on to have great jobs. I know one of the most successful attorneys that I know didn't get a job as a summer associate and then didn't pass the bar, but now is at a top US law firm as a partner and with huge cases and so forth. So it just depends your particular story, and you're going to write it. But sometimes you have to learn how to interview, and it takes a while to learn how to interview, and you have to learn what the law firms are seeking and so forth, and go from there. But I wouldn't really worry about that. I don't think you have anything else I can say. But you need to apply to more places, any place you possibly can. Okay. This is actually interesting. So this is a law firm question. I'm beyond frustrated with work from home. I work with a handful of first years, and due to some combination of remote and general time and bad attitudes, I've had a tough time dealing with them. I generally just try to deal with them on my own, fix their drafts, make changes, while also sending emails and hopping on calls to explain what I'm doing. But I'm lucky if I even get a response. This isn't my first time managing people either. I've never had issues like in the past. I guess my question here is, at what point do you throw someone under the bus? They're clearly not receptive to feedback from me, but I also don't want to derail someone's entire career if they're not used to typical big law expectations. Basically, how to reach these kids. Okay, so tomorrow I do a webinar just like this for law firms. So this question may be someone from that. But most attorneys, young attorneys, do have a lot of sense of entitlement, and many times they don't do good work, and they're not proofreading their work. They believe that because of a good school or because of good grades or because of certain things that that they've made it. And some people decide that they've made it at different points in their career. I know people that sometimes if they went to a really good college, or just got into a really good college, they think they're done. And there are people that go to a good law school think they're done, or people that work in got a job in a good law firm think they're done, or people that make partner in a law firm think they're done. And so you're never done. And this person, attorney or partner, is complaining and saying difficult it is. Most law firms, by the way, when they see this kind of stuff, when they see you have entitlement issues, bad attitude, and so forth, they will just let you go, and they will hire laterally, hoping that they hire people that don't have these problems. And so this is how attorneys get pushed out. This is also how attorneys don't get stuff. So what this attorney will do, this attorney will give work. This is how this attorney is going to deal with it. And I don't know this attorney, he's asking for advice, but what he will do is he will stop giving work to those people. He will give bad reviews. He will ask management to hire laterally good people. And he will also push some people out or give work to older attorneys because he doesn't have time for this. And this dance, by the way, has been going on this whole thing was going on when I was in law school and a junior attorney, and it was going on. My dad was in law school. So people have been doing this stuff forever. But these general entitlement issues, a lot of times people do not respond when someone jumps down on them, but you definitely need to fix all this if you have issues. And that's really it. You need to make sure that you fix them. But this attorney, I would recommend, typically where I come from, you would get maybe one warning or two warnings, and at least at the firms that I've worked at, And if you didn't fess up and fix it, people would stop giving you work. And if it became a problem, they would ask you to leave. This stuff is not good. And this is the problem that a lot of attorneys do have. And this is, you can see how it works. So you need to be, as a good employee, you have to be, look like someone that really wants the work and so forth and doesn't have these issues. Okay, here's another question. All speaking Eagle is better to apply or directly. It depends on the recruiter. It just depends. This is all depends on the recruiter. Certain large law firms expect you to use a recruiter almost always. Very few people do not come through a recruiter. Other smaller law firms rarely hire through recruiters. It just depends on the recruiter. The benefit of recruiter, I'm not going to get too far into it, but then one of the main benefits of recruiter is recruiters will help you position yourself and help you look very good to firms, and much better than you might look on your own, because they can bring out your strengths and say things about you that they wouldn't say on their own. The law firm can also honestly ask the recruiter questions about you and all sorts of things. In my opinion, if you use a good recruiter like me, you're 10 times better applying through a recruiter, almost always better, with hardly any exceptions. But if you're using a lot of recruiters that aren't going into a lot of detail and don't necessarily know everything that they're doing or on how to position you and don't have access to jobs and all sorts of things, then it may not be helpful for you. It just kind of depends. But the big thing is that in reality, hiring is controlled by market forces. So in almost all cases, the law firm is out for themselves, and they're going to hire the person that looks the best to them. The recruiter fees are not a big deal to law firms. They're a very small percentage of whatever the law firm's bringing in from your work. But the main thing is that how you're positioned and how you're taught to talk about interviews and so forth makes a huge difference. I get people jobs several times a week, and in those people that I get jobs for, I would probably say that 3/4 of those people would not have gotten jobs in the same firms on their own had they applied on their own, because there were things they would have done wrong in interviews. There are things, and so all of our people that come to us are professionally coached with coaches that coach them for each interview, that have a lot of experience working in major law firms. And not that's the most important thing, but they understand how attorneys think. They've sat on hiring committees, so they're coaching you there. And then also when someone here talks to you, we have professional interviewers that interview our candidates that understand what law firms want to hear about you, what to say about why you're looking for a job versus not looking for a job, and how to position you. So all that stuff can make a difference with a good recruiter. Now, a poor recruiter that doesn't do that, yes, you're better off many times applying on your own, but it just depends on who you use. And that's like asking, are you better off representing yourself in court or not? If you use a really bad attorney to represent you in court, then yes, you are probably better off representing yourself. Definitely. I've had cases, by the way, where I've used attorneys and to represent me, and I would have been better off representing myself. And it's crazy to say, but there are some very bad attorneys out there. And it's the same thing with any type of agent or recruiter that you use. But in general, you're better off. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. It depends on the questions here. I love all these questions. And everyone's staying on for these questions too, which is nice to see. Okay, I'm only just licensed, looking for work just about anywhere that will accept me as a first-year attorney. I have legal and non-legal positions, mainly in the government sector. How important are first jobs as attorneys to determine your legal career? For example, if I were to start out with a state law job, to what extent would a recruiter later transition to the private sector? That's a good question. You will take the best job you can get, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have to decide what you want, if you want to work in the government or if you want to work in the private sector. There's advantages and disadvantages to each. In the government, obviously, the hours are going to be more predictable. The job actually may be more stable. There's advantages and disadvantages. So you have to decide where you're most comfortable. But yeah, if you take a job in something like the Social Security Administration as an attorney, other than working as a Social Security attorney in a private practice, it's probably going to be difficult for you to transition into the state unemployment benefits office or something, depending on the sophistication of the work that you're taking. And so you need to decide what you're interested in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't transition to private practice. Anybody, when you say license, what a license is, by the way, is a law license is a license to open a legal business. So you can always open your own practice or do anything you want once you get a law degree. But my advice would be to do whatever you can to get a law firm job to start. I think that the training is just very good. And if you like that, and if you don't, then you certainly can work in the government. If you have a lot of experience working for the government, then that may be what interests you the most. And so you've already gravitated towards that. And there's nothing wrong with working for the government. And those are some of the greatest jobs ever. When I worked for the government, and I did a clerkship, but it was in a small town in Michigan, relatively small town. And it was one of the most relaxing, nicest years of my life. It just depends. Okay, let's see. And so that's what I would think about. Okay, let's see. Probably moving parade concept is brilliant. Yeah, so the moving parade, thank you for I do have an article about the moving parade in your job search. I think it's on harrisonbarnes.com. But yeah, you can actually reapply to firms. You can just reapply. One of the things that also happens is many times it's crazy. So I'll post a job sometimes and for an internal position that may not be legal related, and I'll get hundreds of applications. And I'll look at them and I'll be like, oh crap. And I'll look at like the first 20 of them and I won't even think about the other ones because I'm just so overwhelmed. So if someone applies for a job later, then I would maybe look at it. So just don't worry if you're not following it. People take it too seriously. If you have hundreds of applications to review, they may not even look at it. And sometimes it just goes into, and think about it from the standpoint of the law firm. Sometimes the law firms just have an administrator sitting there who's getting pounded with applications all day. They hate it. I would. Think about it. If you're an administrator and you're getting an application every 10 minutes, you look at them maybe briefly, but you're not remembering every application. And if someone looks good, then you forward them on, but maybe they don't. And that's just the job. It's hard, imagine. So sometimes reapplying is a very smart thing. And that's what we do with our applications at BCG. Like we send the candidates a report, or the firms a report every 2 weeks of the people that are pending. We send them a report of the people that they're currently seeing. We match up their current jobs with past submissions and send them notification. There's all sorts of things we do to help. And that's one of the things that helps. Okay, let's see here. Okay, that's another good question. This is for a 30-year tenure who's been a tactician their entire career. Can you give some examples of strategy goals at this point? So you may, 30 years, by the way, is not that long. That means you're in your, middle 50s or early 60s, and you have at least a couple more decades if you want to practice. Your goal may be to, whatever it is, strategy might be to be the best you can in your practice area. It may be to work to build up a law firm or to start a law firm. It may be to, I don't know what your goal would be, but you definitely want to come up with some sort of strategy. It may be to have a job where you get to spend time with your family each night, or it may be to do trials or to represent elderly people. Not that you're elderly, you're not. Just something along those lines. So I would recommend coming up with a goal and something that makes you happy, and then going from there. And I would actually love to do a goal setting session with everyone here, and I'll try to do that maybe in the next couple of weeks, because I like doing these interactive stuff where we go over people's stuff. Okay, I'm in a situation where return to law really is a fallback. Now very interested and have gained additional experience in e-discovery, goals, forensic, mid-50s. I think that's fine. I think that's a great idea. I don't think that's a problem. And there's no question. We've got most of the questions here. Let me see if there's anything else. Just really quick questions. Okay, well, I think that's it for today, guys, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much for all your questions. And next week, we will probably cover either can you be managed or can you do the job? And I certainly appreciate this. And this will be up online for you guys to view in a few days. And thanks again for all your questions and showing up today. Appreciate it. Thanks.